So the first thing you're going to need to do is to measure the head that's going to be wearing the hat. Make sure that the measuring tape is snug, but don't pull it too tight. And you want to measure directly above the eyebrows and make sure that the tape is evenly around the head. You'll notice in the first picture that the tape measure is actually a little bit askew. So in the second photo you can see that I straightened it out so that it is measuring the circumference of the head. Next, you need to record the measurement on the worksheet. Notice that I've tucked the worksheet into a page protector so that I can reuse it again and again. Next, let's lay out your fabric. First, identify the salvage edge of your fabric. I have it pointed out here on this slide. That is the length or the lengthwise grain. If you were to take your hands and pull the fabric crosswise or widthwise, you'll notice that it's very stretchy, and that's what we want to fit around our head. If your salvage edge is really thick and bulky, you may wish to trim it off the edge. Now smooth out your fabric. I use a cutting mat so that I have some straight lines to use as a guide. Smooth it out, pat it out, but do not pull or stretch it. Just smooth it out gently. And then taking tailor's chalk or sidewalk chalk or another type of marker, you can use pins, and a straight edge, and mark your fabric so that you are creating a rectangle that is approximately 27-28 inches, the length of the fabric, by your head measurement plus that 1 inch. So I used a yardstick here and marked my fabric, as you can see, the length, and then I will cut it out. After you have cut along that chalk line, or if you used pins, what I want you to do is to fold this rectangle in half along the 28-inch length. What you're doing is you're creating a long tube. Now pin those open edges together and then sew along this edge with a 1/2 inch seam. I used a narrow zigzag so that it would give as the fabric stretched. Now fold this tube in half with wrong sides together. You are making a shorter tube but it's double thickness. Match up the seam line, and what I did was I pressed open with my hands or my fingers the seam allowances and pinned them so that they would stay in place and not bunch up as I sewed on this new stitching line. Now pin your open edges together, and then using a seam guide or some other type of ruler, mark with chalk or pins a new stitching line that is 4 inches from the edges. Go ahead and mark this the entire way around the tube. Remove all your pins and then cut 1/2 inch strips from the open edge of the fabric almost to the newly sewn stitching line. Be careful not to cut through it. And accuracy is not as critical here. If it's 1/2 inch or 3/8 of an inch, that's not as important. Cut a strip of fabric from your polar fleece that is 1 inch by 8 or 9 inches, and that you will use to tie the top of your hat together. I have a couple of tips for you that I would like to share both when you're preparing to make the hat and when you're actually sewing the hat. If this hat is intended for a younger youth with a smaller head, or you don't have quite enough fabric, it's okay that it's less than 27 inches. If you would like a longer hat or maybe longer fringe, then it's okay that it's longer than 27 inches. If the hat is too long once you have finished it, try rolling up the lower edge of the hat. If when cutting out your fabric, if that salvage edge is extra bulky, go ahead and trim it off before measuring for that rectangle. And when sewing, try using a narrow zigzag stitch for your seam in step number 3. That way it will stretch with the hat. A straight stitch, however, is still best for the stitching line around the top of the hat, but if you use this narrow zigzag stitch, that's okay too. And there you have it, a hat in a hurry. I hope you enjoyed sewing this. If you have any questions or suggestions, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.